Hey, Powersuiters, we'd love to meet you in person. Go to our website at powersuit.com and hit Power Sessions. This is our month-long transformative leadership program specifically designed for women. We're currently across major cities in New Zealand and we're coming to Australia. So get yourself on a wait list, give us a shout of where you want us to land, and we want to see you there. Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Hello, we've been inspired for this week's topic by chatting with a few fabulous powersuiters who want to get more deliberate about their professional paths and their career. So we started a 3-part series, and today we're going to chat a little bit about it. We call it Job Hunting Fit.
We are sticking with this topic despite having our lowest ever newsletter open rate this week.
I know.
Which I hope is the subject line. Go check it out if you haven't already, because this stuff is really important. And we know in the tech community, there's been a bunch of people made redundant this year. We also know other people who've literally been looking for work and finding it much harder in this economic climate. So very much this is about what you can do before you start looking so that when you do, you're in your best.
Yeah.
Put your
best foot forward. That best foot of yours. And it could be that when you see the word job hunting, it is irrelevant. And I think that our whole concept was one day you're going to be looking for a new role. You absolutely will. So how might you be a bit more strategic about that? In addition to this economic climate, as you noted, it could also be how do you recession-proof your career?
Absolutely. And I think even if you're looking internally at promotions, Kristen, we're using new microphones today because we broke our old ones. You have one piece straight here that's like attached to your microphone. Yeah. I was like, these things that we think are way more sensitive, and so we're worried about any movement. So we're trying to stay really still while we're doing it today.
Yeah, and you might notice a slight difference in the sound quality, and that's just because we're rolling with what we've got.
Yeah, we're getting podcast hunting fit. But it is actually interesting that a lot of the time, especially in this economic climate, but actually in most of our lives, we sort of wait until we need to do the thing to do it.
Yes.
And really what we can give ourselves a massive advantage by putting in the prep. We use the exercise analogy. We like to find analogies from across life where if you've got baseline fitness, starting to train for something is so much easier. And this stuff is really simple and it's actually really effective. And when you think about how many jobs are placed through networks, what is it, like 70, 80%?
Yes.
And if you think about how different people present themselves in interviews and all that scrambling at the last minute to update your CV, get your examples together, you can take all that burden off by just chipping away at it while you're getting ready.
Yeah, and it's insurance. There's kind of no downside, but it's there in the event you need it. And if I look back on my career, it's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog. And I think I was a byproduct of opportunities being put in front of me that I then took. But if I were to think back and critically go, was I strategic at any point in my career to say, this is what future me looks like? I'm not sure I can be. And now, in retrospect, after 20 years, I look back and I think, oh man, I'm really happy with where I'm at, by the way. But there was a number of instances in my professional corporate career where had I just put in that time to be a little bit more deliberate, and that's what we're hearing. There's a couple things I'm hearing on some of my coaching calls. One is people don't know if their skills are marketable and what their next step should be. So it's almost like this, they haven't done the self-reflection and been deliberate about what those steps are. Secondly, is some are genuinely feeling stuck. So this is really just a podcast to help unstuck people and to try and inspire those that are feeling really good about their current role to go, okay, but what's next?
We're changing our podcast title to the Non-Stick Podcast. But I also, one thing I have found, which is very heartwarming for me, is a lot of our community are incredibly ambitious and very, very good at what they do. So, like you, they've had a lot of opportunities present themselves.
Mm.
And it's like dating. I always think about things, I'm always finding an analogy, but you often when you're dating, if you're a woman, you wait for someone to hit on you or approach you. Whereas if you're strategic about it, you actually figure out what you want in a partner and you go out and find that thing. If you think about the best way to find a partner. And it's the same thing with the job. If we will have countless opportunities present themselves throughout our lives, and saying yes to them is incredibly important, and it is one of the ways to get ahead. However, having a bit of a plan about where you want to go means that you know when to say your strategic yeses and when to say your kind and polite nos, and kind of head towards your goal.
Yes.
And I think the other thing with goals is that often we get caught up in, oh, it's too far ahead. Who knows if it's going to happen? Who cares if it's going to happen? Having sort of a vague idea of where you want to end up doesn't mean you can't change it. It just means you've got a path you're walking on now until something else changes.
Well, and there's also a sense of purpose behind development.
Yeah.
Because if you're, again, presented with professional development opportunities, you will probably just say yes. What if you were able to really hone those, not only in professional development opportunities, but in the workplace, and get really deliberate about what you're putting your hand up for or what you're asking for exposure to? And so, in a way, this could possibly boost your engagement in your current role.
Absolutely. And we talk about this a lot in business because there's always so many things competing for your attention in business, and knowing what you need to do to go where you want to go is very important. It also just occurred to me, do you know the story of Richie McCaw and the napkin?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's one of New Zealand's all-time great rugby players, male rugby players. And he, what was it, as a
It was his
teenager?
uncle. He was 14 years old.
And he said, his uncle asked him what he wanted to be. And he said, I want to be the world's best rugby player.
Yeah,
I
the
think it was
goat.
something like that.
Yeah.
And so the uncle sat down with him and went, we're going to start there, and worked back and was like, what do you need to do? Well, then you need to be an All Black to be the best. Okay, well, how do you become an All Black? You need to do this. And so actually by stepping it backwards, he then had a whole plan, and he executed that plan like a champion. And now he is known as the world's best rugby player.
And that was half an hour over some tea.
At
With
14.
a teenager.
Yeah.
So I tried the same thing with my kids, actually. After I watched that movie, I was like, so Grayson, you want to be a professional footballer? What does that mean? It didn't quite work the same. However, it will work for us. And I think everyone matures at different rates when it comes to kids. And again, you don't need to have a really clear definition of if you want to be a CEO or if you want to be a top program manager, but you do know that you want to feel fulfilled, you want meaning in your role, you want to feel as though your work means something, you're accomplishing goals for yourself personally, you matter in an organization, your voice is heard, your work matters, and so this will do the same thing. It'll get you there as well.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Well, we've got 3 steps. One is get your plan together. The second is identify your next steps. And then the last one is get your experience examples together. So, and that should guide you in how to build the right experience. So get your plan together. You want to kick that one off?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about sort of those ultimate goals, and actually this is one of those great no skin in the game examples of where you can actually dream big. Like, who cares if you don't hit it in 5 or 10 years' time? So we've said in the newsletter 5 to 10 years' time, go bigger than that if you want to. You can go 10, 20 years, and just think, what would your ultimate dream job be? Like, where do you want to be? And what would be for you? Would it be running a charity? Would it be being an incredible technical expert with a bunch of people to mentor? Would it be in a lab finding a new solution to something? Like, whatever that is, this is your time to dream big, because no one's going to hold you to account on this one. This is very much you going, in the ideal world, what do I want to do? Have you ever had that? Have you ever looked at that?
In terms of
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
I should have thought about this sooner. I knew that I wanted a leadership position. And one of my strengths on the Clifton side of things is status. Now, on
Kristen always does a disclaimer about her
I
status.
do have to say status because it sounds terrible, right? All I care is about the C title or the whatever. It's actually not. What status means is that I want to have meaning and impact in an organization, and I want my work to matter, and I want my work to be visible as a result. And so that I just knew that that's what mattered to me, and I wasn't sure the ultimate end game, but I did have this weird thing of myself in New York in an apartment and in Manhattan, and so I definitely had this vision of future self, which at one point in my life almost came true and then fell through the cracks, and so reevaluated what that looked like. And naturally it changed as I had kids, but I think stretching myself that far in terms of even if it was a little bit blurry did actually help me with my next steps, because when I knew that I was no longer growing, or at
Mm,
which meant I would wake up unhappy and not having fun, I knew it was time to move on, and I had no
mm.
issues about moving on.
I love it because that's as vague as it needs to be. Like we're not saying you have to be super specific here. I think for me, I always knew I didn't want to work in a corporate. I wanted to work for myself. I very much value freedom and the ability to work with purpose and work on my terms, travel, all of that sort of stuff. So, but what I found is as I hit those goals quite quickly, quite early in my career, then I realized, oh, there's a whole other world out there. And actually, I need to get experience in a whole bunch of other things to be able to take those next steps. So, those became my goals of like embedding myself in these corporates because they were my customers. So, how do I understand the mechanics of them more? All that sort of stuff that actually is same thing as
Yeah.
even if it's 3 to 5 years ahead, it's like, okay, I want to be in this position. I'm going to actively now seek out those opportunities. So, we have four questions to ask yourself, and in very power suit style we just say sit down with the timer. I don't know if we want to go through them now because people are most likely running along or
Walking.
walking along at the
Yeah.
moment, but go to our newsletter. We'll have a link in the article, we'll have a link in the bottom, but it very much is four very quick questions so that in 15 minutes, like it's next to no time, you can sit down and come up with a paragraph about that you can pin to your mirror or put in your wallet or just have on hand to be like, this is where I want to be. These are the strengths I want to hone. This is the experience I need to develop. This is the things that I value and the kind of organizations I want to be working for in the next couple of years. And that is your plan. That's all
Yeah.
you need.
Yeah.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the most valuable 15 minutes you might have in your life.
Yeah, and you probably could reverse it engineer if you can't quite figure out the dream job. You might go, here are my 5 skills, which we've made everyone do by now with the high five test. What types, it's almost like doing those vocational tests where you go, what could I be? And this is also equally as an interesting time to go, have I thought about a totally sideways step in my career? What does that look like? And these vocational exams or tests that you can do online, or using your strengths to say what are the types of roles and or jobs that I would be really great in. You can reverse engineer it a little bit using Google and ChatGPT, and out will come some ideas that might just spark more clarity in that.
I so agree. And I remember this just sparked a memory of early on. Remember, there was someone, I think she read our newsletter and she messaged us on Instagram saying, you have inspired me. I quit my corporate job today and I'm going to become an interior designer. It's always been my dream. And
Yeah.
so she'd lined up this new job, completely different career, because she had realized life is short, she had a dream, and this is the time to put that goal into action. And I've heard the same very early on, was that our second podcast when we spoke to the negotiators? And one of them said he took a massive sideways step in his career because he realized he could keep going, getting to the top of his existing field, and that was his initial goal. But then he realized that field was really small, there was limited spaces at the top, and very much harder to get there, and then much lower impact that he could have. So once he realized that, he actually changed how he behaved, took on different jobs, changed his experience, and opened up his options. So I think
Yeah.
that's very useful to do.
Yeah, and I loved hearing after one of our power sessions someone, and sometimes you just have that gut instinct of something you'd love to do, and someone recognized they were about to go back to the workforce after having children. They just had this little dream deep down inside, probably buried it out of fear, that I was going to go out on my own and do this thing. And after the power session, they just thought, now is the time. I'm going to give myself permission to do 6 months of this dream, and I've got this goal. This is what this looks like, and I'm just going to take the steps in order to see if I can get this off the ground.
What was
And
the dream?
well, it was to be have their own HR company.
Amazing.
And so she sent me her website 2 days ago. I mean, they
Amazing.
just, you know, you have to have a website, then you need your first customer, and then you need, and so she's going through all these steps just by saying, here's a plan. I'm going to stick it on the mirror. Yes, it might change. Yes, I might fail, but it gives me a little bit of a North Star, for lack of a better word, to plan for my next 6 months. And that was really encouraging.
And my favorite part about this is when we talk about failure here, there's really no way you can, because you're going to have a career. You're going to have a great career. So it's just going to be a matter of where it lands. And that's kind of exciting, actually.
Where it lands, and probably how much control, again, how much you're calling the shots
Yeah.
versus the universe calling the shots.
Yeah. And how you combine those two. So
Yeah.
next up, step 2 is identify your very next step, which we've sort of started to jump into a little bit.
Yeah.
But I really like this because for the article, I started Googling what are some new job titles that are emerging in 2023. And there are so many. Like,
Yeah.
I think we talked very early on in our podcast about AI. We've talked about some of the massive shifts in the world. Remote work, it is opening up a world of opportunities that you may not even be aware of yet.
Yes, yes. I all I can, and sorry to go back to my daughter, but this is such a tangible thing that we had to go through in the last year, and she recognized that she wanted to do something in product design. So you need to have the right qualifications in order to do that. So it was her not knowing that. She would have got to the end of high school and then probably not qualified. Well, she wouldn't have qualified. She was actually shocked when we had to reverse engineer. What's the actual next step? I.e., what are the classes that you need to be
Yeah.
enrolled in next year so that you could, as an option on the table, land your dream degree, which would get your dream job or whatever, if that is the way that she goes. And so we had to go back to her school and ask for permission to get her into physics. I mean, who knew? Who knew?
Yeah.
This is something that we had to take control as a family of where she wanted to go and help her reverse engineer. And we flipped out of some courses that would have been useless, got into some, albeit more challenging courses for her, but one step at a time. And thankfully, and so that's really tangible for me. But I think equally, it could be, oh, I think I do want to be a senior project manager. And then you might, what are the skills or experience that, you know, what is the actual next step? It could even be booking a coffee with someone who is a senior project manager and figuring out, tell me about how you got there and what are the skills that you're using every day, and deciding that could be your next step.
Yeah, yeah. And it could be, I feel like from my perspective, because I'm thinking about even my friend who's being made redundant on Friday, and just thinking about her next step. And we were talking about, we've been going for walks for the last couple of weeks and talking about where she wants to be in 5-10 years. And she's quite clear on that.
Wow.
And so we were talking about all the jobs that she's been incredibly good at job hunting. So she's been doing things like connecting with people who can connect her to the jobs, really utilizing her networks, finding recruiters, all that sort of stuff that she's having to do at the last minute because redundancies don't always give you a lot of warning. But what I found really interesting is knowing where she wanted to go meant all these opportunities in front of her, we could look at them and go, well, this one actually in job title is a step back. Is that something that's going to take you closer to this? Because I can understand why you want to take it, because you are going to not have a job in a couple of weeks, but is there room to negotiate there to get a job title that fits better? Or is this a better job title? And should you be proactively looking for this?
Yes.
And so I really like this find your next step, because that big lofty goal of running the world or whatever you want to do, that feels really far away. Whereas this next step is really tangible. And if you are comfortably sitting in your job right now and you have no plans to leave in the next year or two, your next step could be quite small, or it could be actually looking at that next job and going, what do I need to do to get prepared for that? Because you do not want to end up in a situation that you're ready to go and then you're getting turned down for lack of experience, or because you actually didn't know that you needed to build the stuff. You've got so much time now to do it. So like start now. So you're like there when you need to be there.
Yeah, and a perfect example, I was chatting with someone who's actually in the UK now doing interesting stuff for a startup, but she came to me and she said, have you heard of this concept of chief of staff. It feels really interesting
Mm.
and an exceptional fit for my personality. And so it is a role that's quite often quite senior. In right now it's in the tech space. I trust there's other titles for it in other areas, but you kind
The
of are.
West Wing, Chief of Staff.
Yes, of course, that's probably where it came from. But you're kind of the 2IC from the CEO and not an assistant by any means. You are, or not a COO and worried about operations. You're effectively taking the strategy from the brain of the COO and making sure it's being filtered across the organization, and then all of the updates come back to the CEO. Really interesting role called chief of staff. And so I said, right, well, let's go onto LinkedIn and let's find a bunch of chief of staffs. So we did that, and we looked back through. It was almost okay, it wasn't very scientific or this comprehensive research, but what was interesting was there were really common themes from all the current chief of staffs. One is that they started at one of the big four, the accounting.
Oh,
Well, what are they
yes.
called now? They're not accounting firms anymore. What are they called?
Consulting firms.
Consulting. So that was a really common theme, consultancy. Ironically, she was at that time at a consultancy. But then do you know what their next step was? Was in an operational or a growth role in a startup. And that was a common theme through, we
Mm.
probably looked at 10 of them. And I said, right, you've got consultancy. How about you just consider what it would look like to be in an operational or growth role? Which one is more suited to you? Operational was more suited to her. And then we looked at, right, well, what are some, now we know the kind of organization you need to look for. What are your next steps? It was, coffees. In fact, she ended up moving to London, and sure enough, she's with a startup now, which is really exciting. She got out of her comfort zone of consultancy and
Mm.
did that. I don't know if she's exactly operational role. I should stalk and see where she got to, but that was really helpful for her to look at LinkedIn and reverse engineer what people had done and recognized chief of staff probably needed some really great process, which was what
Mm.
consultancies give you, and client side work and influencing stakeholders. And then you needed to get that real deep
In-depth
in deep
experience. Yeah.
experience of running a startup and what that means. So it didn't take a lot of time. Again, that was an hour conversation we had over
Mm.
a beer and a laptop, and we were able to figure that out for her where she could identify her next step.
I love it because I feel like we don't expect, or we shouldn't expect a smooth path to where we want to go. That's just unrealistic.
Well, it's back in the 50s for
Ugh.
the.
I mean, who wants to go back to the 50s? But when you think about all those examples, how differently they would have gone if that person didn't have an idea of where they were heading, you could end up all over the place instead of taking sideways steps or steps down or grasping at an opportunity that kind of is kind of okay. And you're freeing yourself from all those little pauses in your
Yeah.
career on
Yeah.
your path to where you want to go.
Yes.
So let's take you. So you've got a bit of a plan now. You've identified your next step, big or small, depending on how far away you are. What the third thing is to get some examples of your experience ready. And I love this as well because firstly, most people I know panic in the lead up to any performance reviews because they're trying to figure out what they did. And this is a wonderful practice to get into because you now have them whenever you need them.
Yeah, and actually coming out of one of our power sessions, I remember a huge action that many of them have taken away is to go, I'm going to pause every Friday. It could even be once a month and reflect back on what I've done and note down the successes. And what a powerful way to jot down all of the impact that you're having at an organization. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got those ready, but also to reflect on, oh, amazing, I delivered that, or I was instrumental and flexed the skill doing this.
Mm-hmm. I really like it. And I was speaking to a couple of people last week who were talking about taking their next step up. And we were talking about some of the experience they had and what they might need to have. So things like managing or building relationships with senior stakeholders. And I said, do you have experience doing that? And one woman said, yeah, I do. I work with senior stakeholders all the time. And I said, okay, well, how do you work with them? Do they give you instructions and then you deliver and report back? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, is that what you're expected to do when you are working alongside them? And she was like, oh no, I'm expected to work with them to figure out what we're doing. And so she could go away from that and go, my perception, I have to move my perception from someone who's reporting to that person to someone who's working alongside them and start building up examples of that in small ways, be it when they come to me with something engage with them in that idea and note that down, or challenge it if I think it's not the right thing, or ask some questions in the meetings. So when I come to take my next step, I've actually already come with all the experience of already operating at that level
Yeah.
rather than operating beneath it, reporting up, which is not as valuable when you're taking that next step up.
Yeah, and I liked your example earlier of the title and challenging your friend on that because equally, if you're currently operating at a higher level that's being recognized for what you're already doing, getting that right title, annoying as it is, and as corporate as it is, that title means a lot in the eyes of the next organization or the next role that you go for is to actually be recognized for what you're currently doing. So to reflect on that as well and have some conversations with management.
I agree, and I think that's a big one. We've talked a lot about confidence last week, and that has resulted in so many conversations with power suitors in the last week. But also from coaching sessions, that's another huge one. I am appalled, frankly appalled, by the number of people I've coached who are unofficially managing someone, and they haven't been given the authority to manage them, but they've been given the full responsibility without the actual ability to do anything, and until they prove that they can manage the person they're managing without the authority to manage them. And so there's all these little things. There's people, I know other people who've stepped into their manager's role while their manager's on leave, again, completely unrecognized. And all of these things are things you're already doing that are operating at the level to where you might want to go. And it's so simple to make sure you get recognition for them and to raise it. And it's always, no one's going to offer it to you. They're not going to. They're not going to. I mean, there's every now and again you meet an amazing leader, but most of the time they're going to ask you to do it and maybe not even give you a pay rise to do it. But you are allowed to say, if you think that you want me to manage this person, instead of forcing me to do it for free, why don't we do a trial run? We do it for 3 months where I'm recognized for it. And if it doesn't pan out and you mentor me along the way and you give me feedback and we will, rather than make me do it without like, it just feels like such a biased way of operating. I don't know many men who are given that expectation.
That's pretty cheap. So go back to our very what is it, second episode that was on negotiation. Have a listen to that because it just gets you valued in terms of salary and job title for what you're worth on the market. And the flip side of that, I suppose, this would be really interesting for you to share your career, your professional plan, and the experience and the next step required with your current organization, be it your manager or sponsor or mentor if you've got one of those, and to just say, this is a goal of mine and I need to develop these 3 skills for my next step and to actually work with your manager on that. So for example, if you do have a dream to lead a team, it would be I would love to manage a person and what are the steps? What do I need to do in order to get into that space? But I think being really open about your goals shows it shows engagement, it shows ambition, and you've got nothing to lose because if they come back and say, "Oh, sorry, we can't support any of your growth," well, you now have options on the table.
Yeah, you now know what's happening.
Is there somewhere that you can go where that can support,
Yeah.
recognizing tougher economic times, but you've got options on the table.
Well, and you've got time. And I think on that note, I've had this, I don't know if you've had this before, but I remember working with a bunch of people who were reporting to me who stated where they wanted to be next, but without any plan to get there. So they'd just say, I want to manage someone. And I was always like, okay, but I don't see you there now. And I'm happy to work with you to get there. But they almost wanted to just have it because that was their goal. And I had so much respect for people who came to me with the goal and the plan of like, this is where I want to go. These are the things that I think I need to develop. Can you work with me to get there? Rather than I expect it, or they don't tell me their goals and you have no idea, or they have no idea. So I think there's a real advantage you can give yourself by being open about it. And if it's not an option now, asking what the steps are and how you're getting that support, because good leaders really want to help you get there. And it's such an easy win.
Yeah, and if people want to be more strategic and really want to flex that muscle, this is the perfect 3 activities to put into place.
And it's so easy. And if you've got a couple of years, like just chip away at it and you'll find your next step could well be a jump. And that's exciting.
Yeah. Let us know how you get on. Quickly, Nat, 2 things. Number 1, how is your peer group? Do you have it locked in?
I have my group locked in.
Great.
I
Not a date yet.
the barrier for me at the moment is one of my friends. I don't have an email address, so I haven't put in an invite.
Okay. So
But we have a group, and
there's an
they are a
administrative
great group.
barrier. How many people?
I think we've got 6 of us who I put together,
And
and
then
then
you,
I
which is
asked them.
7.
Oh no, I think including me.
Mm.
I wanted to leave a couple of spaces because there's a couple of things. One is they don't all really know each other, and two, some of them have really interesting workplaces. So I wanted to leave space for them to invite someone as well. And also because people are busy, there's a lot of people with young children. I maybe was thinking about making it more like 11 to start and seeing who turns up
Yeah, right.
because there's a good chance there'll be a few cancellations in the first month or two. So
Amazing.
that's the goal at the moment. But yes, how's yours going?
Yeah, great. Locked
Kristen
in.
ran out and grabbed everyone.
I did. I was like, dibs, I've got this person. And so I've,
Actually, there wasn't much crossover. There wasn't
no,
any crossover.
no, I've got 7. Absolutely have 2 more in my brain should I need them. But I've got 7 coming to my house on November 2nd. And I haven't sent out instructions yet. But for those who are curious, what we're chatting about, 2 podcasts ago, we said how to turn your personal network into professional allies. And so we're running an experiment. Feel free to
Professional
go back.
superpower.
Professional superpower. Feel free to go back, listen to that episode, and join us on that challenge because our podcast on early November will be dedicated to how our peer groups went.
How did your people respond when you invited them?
Yes, thank you for thinking of me. Oh my gosh, this sounds amazing.
Exactly the same. It was
Yeah.
amazing how quickly people were like, yes, please, I really need
Yeah.
this. And isn't it funny? Until someone asks, we don't do it, and everyone wants it.
I
So,
know. And then the last question, because I said there were 2 things.
yes.
What do you think we should name this podcast episode so people listen to it?
not job hunting fitness because no one opens the newsletter.
We need a clickbaity link.
Well, maybe people should tell us. How to make your next career step a giant leap forward.
Okay, we'll give it a go. We'll report back on how that goes.
I
Please
should have been madly using ChatGPT or something.
well, we can do that. But please hit follow, 5 stars. Reply to our weekly newsletter. I assume you're signed up. If not, hit powersuit.com and sign up, where you can get a happy update from Nat and I each week, filled with lots of tools and tips that can help you reach your professional goals. And we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.